Hey everyone. So, first off, social engineering is the art of manipulating people into giving you useful information. The types of information that social engineers are looking for vary, but when they're targeting individuals,
They're looking for things like passwords, bank information, or access to computers so they can install malicious software. So people choose to use social engineering because it's relatively easy. It's easier to ask someone to give you their password than it is to try all the different combinations until you get the correct password, unless they have a really bad password, but that's another discussion. Social engineering has a relatively high payoff with little technical ability necessary. Does anyone have a guess for how much money CEOs lost to email scams over the last 3 years?
A lot.
Any number?
Tens of billions of dollars.
More than that.
3 billion.
Yes.
1 billion.
Higher.
7 billion.
Lower.
1.3 billion.
Yes.
Really?
So,
Really?
yeah. According to the FBI, it is 2.3 billion. And that's for that's a lot of money for just one type of social engineering. Social engineers have two main tactics that they use. So they can either go with the manipulation route or the influence route. Manipulation is exerting devious influence over a person for your own advantage, usually with a negative or very rarely a neutral motivation in mind. And it's important to note that while manipulation tactics work, usually really effectively, they can also introduce negative feelings to the target. So it's difficult to use the same target multiple times as an information source. There are a couple of ways people use for manipulation, including the following. So first is increasing susceptibility. Oftentimes under stress, people are going to be more susceptible to suggestion or manipulation. So social engineers will increase their target stress levels by altering emotion. Usually they go for fear or anger because those are really good ways to stress people out. Number 2 is environmental control. So environmental control refers to manipulating the environment under false pretext. So that would cause the target to act in a way that he or she or they wouldn't normally behave. The goal here is information extraction or even blackmail. Third is forced reevaluation. So that's when a target is presented with facts or something that is played off as a fact but isn't really a fact. That contradicts their beliefs, rules, or instructions received. And that gives the illusion that the target will face negative repercussions if they don't do something that the social engineer asks them to do, even if the target knows that the request goes against protocol. Fourth is removing their power. So removing someone's control or perception of control removes their power. People want to feel in control, and when they don't, they usually make not so great decisions. Making a target rush and forcing the target to make decisions without giving them time to think and be logical removes their control of the situation and increases their likelihood of compliance. In contrast to manipulation, influence is the process of getting someone else to want to do, react, think, or believe the way that you want them to. And usually there'll be a neutral or positive motivation in mind. There are several tactics for influence, including the following. So first is obligation. The obligation principle is a lot like reciprocity, but instead of feeling indebted to someone in return for a favor, the feeling is generated from moral, societal, or legal obligation. So the target, when questioned, will feel obligated to respond. It's really weird if you walked up to someone, asked them a question, and they kind of stood there and just stared at you. And giving tidbits of information can also trigger obligation. The target will feel obligated to divulge some sort of information. So we're social beings. When people start conversations with us, we feel obligated to respond in some manner. Second is concession. Concession is the act of giving up something that you want or appear to want, so other people will give up something that they want in return. And this technique is seen really often in sales, so whenever you haggle over prices, that's a form of concession. Third is authority. So we're all taught from a very young age to respect authority and listen to people who are in positions of authority over us. So social engineers positioning themselves as a target's boss are going to have a better time generating compliance than someone pretending to be the target's janitor. Then fourth, social proof. So social proof is where a group or a person begins to think that something is good, acceptable, or okay based on the fact or idea that he, she, or they think others view it as good or acceptable. The target will feel pressured to comply if the social engineer makes them think that their peers agree or act in the way they're requesting. So much like peer pressure, if everyone else is doing it, you might think that it's okay. And there's this really good video on YouTube of this elevator experiment. So the experimenters will walk into the elevator and face backwards, which isn't a normal thing to do. And then the person that they're doing the experiment on will walk in, see everyone facing the wrong way, and eventually they'll all turn around as well. So, on to the actual process of social engineering. The first step is reconnaissance. So, the social engineer will gather OSINT, or open source intelligence, from sources like Google, social media, and Glassdoor. They can get information on anything from who owns a domain, a company structure, schedule, colleague names, list of routers listening to a specific port on a company's IP address, what hardware and software a company is using, the level of security employees have, and things like that. So social engineers usually don't have a problem getting information from OSINT. Their problem is the amount of information they get and having to parse through all of that information to get the relevant bits. And one caveat with OSINT is that even though it's public information, individuals can still be imprisoned or executed for using OSINT. Sources can also forbid users from using it in a specific way that results in this legal gray area. So don't try this at home. The next step is building pretext and rapport. So before social engineers can interact with their targets, they have to create a backstory for themselves, the way a spy creates an alias before they go on a mission. So one example, and that's called building pretext, and one example of that would be, hey, my name is Mary and I do internal audits at EY. We lost some of the results from your annual employee satisfaction survey. Do you have time to answer a few questions? It will only take a couple of minutes. And it's human nature to want to help other people, so when other people ask us for help, we usually aren't too wary of them contacting us, and that makes us susceptible to various techniques of manipulation and influence. Social engineers will build rapport, get us to like them, trust them, and often inject a sense of urgency into the situation. And that will release certain chemicals in our brain, which will let us take actions that we normally wouldn't take and probably shouldn't take. Yes?
What's important when building a pretext? What's the most important elements of it?
The important element would be something that's credible and something that would give you like a position of authority. So things like a manager, someone from IT, someone that would credibly be asking the type of questions that you would want to ask.
So something that's convincing.
Yeah. So an example of building rapport would be, hello, can I speak to Bob Simmons? Hi Bob, this is Mary from IT. I just got off the phone with Matt Smith. Matt's off sick today, but I'm sure you already know that since you guys share a cubicle. I wanted to find out how that new workstation is working out for you. I know Windows 10 isn't everyone's favorite, but hopefully the new Office version is helping you. So within that short snippet, this social engineer used several pieces of OSINT that they gathered, including employee names, their colleague names, what their colleagues are doing, staff desk locations, new technology technology rollouts at a company and what technologies the company is using. So they seem pretty convincing. So step 3 is maintaining rapport. Social engineers have to be careful to maintain rapport and keep the relationship that they've built intact. They don't want to spook their targets, so social engineers can't set off red flags, especially if they want to get many pieces of information out of them, or if they want to contact the same person again later on. And people tend to be really trusting, so as long as no red flags are set off, they'll continue to divulge information. So if that social engineer does his job correctly, Bob is going to think that they really are married from IT, and he's going to keep telling her information. And the last step is profit. So the target is convinced that they're talking to an internal employee because they already have so much information, and it doesn't seem like someone from outside the company can have all that information. And that means they'll probably feel free to share internal information like company logistics, technologies, things on other employees, or physical infiltration. And now that you have a basic overview of how social engineering works, we're going to talk about some specific types of social engineering. So the first one is phishing. This is when victims are persuaded to hand over personal details over the phone. There's a number of techniques that social engineers have at their disposal. So the first is information. Social engineers will already have things like the target's name, address, phone number, bank details, essentially all the information that the target would expect a genuine caller to have. The second is urgency. Targets are made to believe that their assets are in danger and have to act quickly, which generates fear, and that will lead people into acting without thinking through everything properly. Third is phone spoofing. So the phone number that appears on your caller ID will look at like it's coming from somewhere else. And so when you see that number, you think that it's the genuine caller and you're tricked immediately. Fourth is holding the line. So in some cases, social engineers are able to hold the telephone line. So even if you hang up and then try to call back, you'll get put straight back to the social engineer instead of whoever you call. Fifth is atmosphere. So social engineers will play some sort of sound effects. So instead of hearing just a guy in a basement, the target will hear a lot of background noise, so they'll think they're in a call center. And six, multiple calls. So social engineers might call multiple times with messages like, hey, it's Mary again. I couldn't get in contact with Bob. Is there someone else in the office that I can talk to? When we don't expect people to spend this much time and try so often to contact us unless they're the genuine person. So social engineers will take advantage of those facts. So next is phishing. We've all seen those emails in our spam folder with things like, hey, you just got a $500 Target gift card. Like, follow this link and enter all your information below. And those are really obvious. But sometimes phishing emails can look really convincing by copying branding and spoofing email addresses so they look genuine. These emails will play on your trust and use a friend, whether it's a bank, a friend, or somebody that you expect communications from. So that throws you off.
They can't follow you.
Exactly. And they'll put urgency on you to try and worry you into responding. And a specific form of phishing is spear phishing, and that's when specific employees or high-profile individuals will be targeted. These emails attempt to get users to divulge personal information or sensitive information, or infect devices with malware, such as keyloggers that can then steal everything that the user types. And spear phishing in particular is difficult to detect since it's targeted at specific people, so the email can be tailored to that individual. Another form of phishing is smishing, and that's phishing over text messages, and they'll encourage people to pay money or click on suspicious links. And sometimes the attackers will try to get the victims on the phone by sending text messages asking them to call a number, so they'll have another chance to persuade the target. And other times they're directed to a website to confirm information, where they serve trojans or other malware that steals information from the device. And targets are more susceptible to smishing because we're not as used to getting spam through our text messages. And with emails, we have the spam filter, all the junk gets put in there and we never have to see it unless we want to. But with text messages, there's no equivalent, so every text that gets sent, we pretty much will see it. And people that aren't careful are going to get phished. And also, when there's those misspelled words that are like huge red flags in emails, they don't seem as big of a deal when text messages because we think someone just made a typo when they were typing to us. Once you send a message, you can't backspace, so it's not a big deal. They're not actually phishing me. It's the first person. And the next form of social engineering is tailgating. So this is a form of physical social engineering. So someone who lacks the proper authorization is going to follow an employee into a restricted area. And in a common type of tailgating attack, a person will impersonate a delivery driver and wait outside a building. And when the employee gains security's approval and opens the door, the attacker will ask the employee to hold the door for them and thereby get access off of someone who's authorized to enter the company. We're taught to be polite. We see someone with their hands full, we're going to hold the door open for them. So social engineers, they take advantage of all of those things. And now, how do we keep ourselves secure? So, number one is limiting the amount of information you share online. So, even if you think it's only going to a couple of friends that you send it to, you don't know who's actually going to see it. Once it's online, anyone can see it. So keep that information safe if you don't want everyone to see it. 2, always question requests for sensitive information. Does whoever asking for that information really need it? What is the motivation behind their request? 3rd, don't share information with people you don't know unless you can verify their identity. 4th, call people back through a front desk number and their extension or a number that you know is theirs. And most importantly, don't share your password with people. Like, no one needs to know your password except for you. Keep that to yourself and you will be good. So, any questions? Nick?
So earlier in the talk, you mentioned the use of some of these techniques could get us executed. Is that like a United States thing? Should I be concerned?
I think it's like when they think you're gathering information and they try you for treason. If you are,
Yeah, okay. Do you see most social engineering targeted at companies or specific individuals? Like, is money the only motivation? What's kind of like the landscape for social engineering?
So social engineering will either target companies or individuals. So usually when they're social engineering a company, they'll go after people that are less technical, like in HR, and once they get in, they'll have information on other people, and then since they can use that person's credentials, people will think, oh, it's from HR, it's valid, but not really. Any other questions?
How can a company keep themselves from getting socially engineered?
So training their employees is really important, just generating awareness, making sure people know like what are the tactics, what are ways to protect themselves, and generally just keeping secure in general. Yeah.
Just as a follow-up, also like company policy is a really big thing. So at DEF CON this year, during the social engineering village, the target was security companies. So they had individuals calling into security companies, and there was a certain company, Oracle,
God,
which was one of the targets. And basically, like all of their employees were trained. The pretext was like I'm doing an internal security audit and all the employees were trained to, I don't answer surveys and hung up. So like company policy can go a huge way.
Like, I know that the company I work for also, for like tailgating, for instance, they have these little cartoons next to every door reminding you to look behind you and check badges. So you see that in a lot of different companies, different things to emphasize about what policies they want to try to enforce. It's still up to their employees to actually do it, but they can at least try.
Sort of going off of that, another big thing with company policy is company policy about having on automatic updates, because let's face it, you can train people as much as you want, but it just takes one mistake. But especially if people are trying to install malware on your devices, a lot of times if you have on auto updates, that's a really good second line of defense for when something does inevitably go wrong.
So, in the case that somebody does get phished, what should we accept to recover their information?
I'm not too familiar with the procedure. Nathan, do you want to take that?
Typically, the first thing, if you're in a company setting, you want to lock out all accounts. So a lot of companies have stuff like single sign-on, and so it's really easy to just like restrict access. So restrict access to personal boxes and like all company accounts that are associated, because if they phone their box, you basically assume that all their accounts are compromised. So you just want to shut them down and then do an analysis of how much damage is done. Like what systems they access, so like, okay, going and checking logs for sensitive things, did they have access to certain databases, okay, did they actually access those databases, like how far into the system did they get, and then doing reactionary stuff from there.
You said that auto updates are a second line of defense. How does that work?
Most computer systems now will have, just a little box that says turn on auto update. You click it, possibly enter your password, and then, if you have an iPhone, you can turn on auto update for apps in the App Store. I know at least OS X has auto update for its App Store.
How does that protect you against social engineering?
Because a lot of times, and again, this is if someone's trying to install malware, a lot of times the way that malware gets onto your computer is through vulnerabilities that have already been patched, but that you're an update or two behind. So those vulnerabilities are still, technically they're fixed, but not on your computer.
Another thing too is it gets your users to be more aware when they do get a pop-up to install something. So you have to be careful, because occasionally you will install a new version automatically that is vulnerable. But they usually update it pretty quickly as well, which is what Kent was saying. The other thing is that if you're installing something manually, you kind of stop paying attention to those little pop-ups saying, do you want to install this, do you want to install that, do you want to install this. So if your users get complacent about just clicking yes all the time, they're going to install malware. If they're more used to things auto-installing in the background and they get a pop-up of something, that's weird, I don't usually get this, they might read it rather than just kind of clicking yeah, whatever. So that's the other thing, it kind of changes the expectations of the user.
What if you're concerned about phishing on like an individualized level? Are there any tips for like the individual to avoid being phished?
Tips from earlier and just being careful with your emails. Like if you see a link, like hover over it and make sure that link actually takes you where you think it should go. Like if you're going to a bank, there should be a little block in the URL, and if there isn't, you should definitely switch banks. Yeah.
Is social engineering ever used in like industry?
Definitely.
Yes.
How so?
So people target companies, companies will target each other. Yeah.
Can they do that? I think speaking companies.
Chinese companies
Not
can.
legally, but as long as no one can prove it, like there's nothing you can do. Yeah.
So a question that hasn't really been answered is whether or not social engineering is illegal.
I mean, she said that you get executed.
Yeah, I think the execution part pretty much got me on
Whether or not it's legal or not. Just a note is like we covered like the difference between manipulation and influence, and like we can influence each other in everyday life, and that's social engineering. It's not necessarily like it's neutral to positive effects, but it can be still social engineering. Like if I get you to do something that you may or may not want to do, that's still social engineering. So.
Are there any like big examples of big damage done from social engineering?
So I guess the thing with the email scams and how much money people lost over that, like social engineering has been on the rise, so there have been more attacks and battle and yeah.
The reason that you don't usually hear about social engineering is because really generally it is one part of gaining access to a system. And usually it's earlier. So you gain access to, you know, the CEO's kid's computer, send an email to the CEO using a vulnerability in, let's be honest, probably PDFs or Flash or Word. They open it. That exploit is then what you use to, you know, get access to the customer database and steal the credentials that, you know,
The card numbers.
then end up, yeah, spewed all over the web and everyone's freaking out.
I think when all the celebrity photos got leaked, I think that might have been social engineering.
No, that was a brute force attack.
Oh, it was.
Do you know of any resources that people can go to learn more about social engineering and like how it's a little bit different than traditional security and that you can't necessarily like practice it? Do you know of any resources that you can go to like read about different practices and just like how to learn more?
Generally, kind of just Googling about it or some tactics that people use, and then also, you know, some white hat officers have tried forms of engineering, social engineering, so you can go to them if you want more information. But generally, just doing research by yourself. Yeah.
There's actually a website that you can go to called Have I Been Pwned? And it basically lists like if your email registered to any account on a website has been leaked, and people actually can pay like a monthly subscription to get access to all of that stuff.
Sounds like you get owned by
It's really interesting actually. It like lists all the websites that you've been subscribed to that have like had database breaches.
Mm-hmm. And there is a free subscription, so you can enter your email, and if your name ever does show up in a breach, it will send an email to you essentially saying, your email showed up in this breach. Might want to change your password.
There's also a really good resource. You go to socialengineer.org. Chris Hadnagi, who built up the social engineering village at DEF CON, is the CEO of it, and there's a lot of great resources in there in terms of defining what social engineering is and going into a lot more of like psychology and all of that as like a very scientific approach almost to social engineering. So if you're interested in that kind of side of things, that's a good resource.
Also adding to that, I'll drop this onto Facebook of this event. There's a great talk by one of my former coworkers about social engineering and builds off a lot of the stuff that Amy talked about that you could check out on Facebook.
You should tell your social engineering story now.
Actually, she pretty much covers it much better than I do.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Do we have any questions through the Q&A thing? That was cool, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Do you know if it's mostly like just an individual that's doing something, or like are there like groups of people that
There's foreign government-sponsored social engineering, government-sponsored social engineering, and then
other than like
also
the companies and stuff? Okay.
Is there like a most popularly used form of social engineering?
I'd say the most popular has been phishing, but smishing is also on the rise as people are using text messages more often. Yeah.
How far into social engineering can you get before you're like executed? Like, I'm assuming that it isn't illegal to impersonate someone over email, but.
No.
Technically, it would be
Yeah, but
considered,
for identity
I think it would be against, the internet.
It's essentially a form of identity theft and can be pursued as such in court. So you need to be careful of who you, most of the time you're working for a company that has been given permission. So a company will do like, you'll pay me to social engineer your company, and so like you'll give me permission, and that's how a lot of it's done. But like in other instances, like if you don't get permission and you're caught, like you can definitely be sued for damages, identity theft, and all that stuff.
I believe it's technically against the Computer Fraud Protection Act.
Yes.
And the bottom line is, in this call, obviously, we don't advocate doing these things for anything other than legitimate reasons, right? You often see this in security firms, you sometimes you see them with permission as kind of a training exercise. Don't do these against your professors. Don't do these at all.
Unless it's for class. Yeah, unless
security for class,
security.
but that's a training exercise.
1, 2, 3, and Dr. Girl tells you so.
If you're going to commit an end crime, or you're, I mean, if it's leading to a larger crime that's more definite, then don't do it, right? Don't impersonate people. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. When you get in trouble, I think we said that it's identity theft for a lot of cases. Just looking at information up is not, but as soon as you start to mislead people, you can run into identity theft. Impersonating various authorities is often another crime. That kind of thing. If there's money involved, it can be fraud.
Is it considered fraud if, like, I mean, but like, but like, if you were to just make up an identity, like Mary never existed, you just say you're Mary from IT, is that fraud? Technically? Oh, I'm not gonna do it, but like, would that be, like, would you be?
We're not lawyers.
Kind of.
I mean, it depends on, like, if it's, it depends. It is a very legal gray area, and I would not recommend you take our advice as actual legal advice. In fact, disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. If you take my legal advice, that's on you. I mean, like, obviously, like, people play characters all the time, and people aren't going after people who, play characters under legitimate means. But if you're using it to try to persuade someone to do something, that's different from, like, the progressive people using flow. That's what I will say about it. We are not lawyers.
And confirm.
What is flow?
Like Flo, the progressive lady.
Oh.
What are some of the most popular techniques the most accessible? You should look at the TED Talk about phishing, and the guy talks to the scammers.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
What was the question?
Like, what is the most popular, like, type of phishing email?
Oh,
Or it'll be things like, if it's coming from the CEO's wife to the CEO, like, here's a grocery list, a PDF or Word document with grocery list dot, PDF or dot docs.
Will the IRS ever call me about my tax return?
But you have 24 hours where they can go in on your bank account.
Does your name start with Donald? If not, no.
Relevant humor.
Is it possible to socially engineer someone without ever actually interacting with them?
So
It
like
just
by
depends what you define as
Indirect social.
So, not emailing them, like, I guess, social engineering, I heard like, someone threw a bunch of flash drives in the parking lot of like the Pentagon or something, and someone picked it up and they put it in the computer and did all that stuff, so is that like social engineering?
Yeah.
But that's interactive.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming I'm not getting my money from that Nigerian prince that promised. What's
I mean,
what's that all about?
anything's possible, but I would not get your hopes up.
Actually, he sent it to me. Send me $1,000 and I'll forward it to you.
Sounds good.
Thanks for coming out, and